is a very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated.
Trump has repeatedly accused Iran of attempting to rebuild its nuclear program, saying Tehran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran has stood by its nuclear program, saying it was always for civilian purposes. Trump also called on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms. Inside Iran, hospitals have been placed on high alert. With ambulances dispatched from across the capital. The attacks come despite representatives from Washington and Tehran holding indirect negotiations in Geneva this week. And as Iran's retaliatory strikes aim for US targets in neighboring countries, the region is facing fears it could be dragged into a wider, longer conflict. Perry Wilton, Al Jazeera.
Mohammed Val is in Tehran for us. Mohammed, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that there has been an attack on a sports hall in southern Iran that's killed at least 15 people. Do you have any more details at this point?
We don't have details of any new death toll, for instance. We still hear only about 15 people, but we understand this may develop into more casualties, as we have seen with the strike earlier today on a school in another area of Iran. The toll began with about 20 people, and then it rose to more than 80 people. So we understand that maybe some people are still under the rubble, and that situation is developing. We're expecting more from the authorities about this attack that has killed 15 people so far in the town of Lemda, in the Fars province, to the south of the country. But we have also a wave of attack that took place just less than an hour ago, about 40 minutes ago. Here in Tehran, we heard at least 7 loud explosions in western and eastern parts of the Iranian capital. Other cities have also been targeted, according to the reports we have, including Zanjan in the west, Urmia in the west also, Bushehr in the south, and the whole city of Qum, south of Tehran, as well as Garmadare in Al-Burz province, west of Tehran. So, I mean, this is a new wave of attacks that has targeted several cities, including also, in addition also to Tehran. And that's an indication of the fact that this campaign is going on as the Americans and the Israelis have promised. And the Iranians are not giving much by way of details about the targets specifically, or the casualties, or the amount of destruction that has been taking place. The Iranians are much more focused now on the possibility of someone seizing the opportunity of these strikes to do something that can hurt national security. So the police is disseminating messages, warning people and asking them to put any suspicious activity in the streets. So because the authorities are trying to botch that attempt by the Americans and the Israelis to create a situation of chaos that can be seized, according to the authorities here, that can be seized by elements, rogue elements, or people who are here implanted as spies for the enemy to create chaos and confusion in the country.
OK, we're going to go to Rosalind Jordan, who's in Washington, D.C. for us. And I know Donald Trump hasn't spoken or been seen himself so far there today. But I understand that the White House has put out a statement explaining exactly what he has been up to in the last few hours.
Well, according to the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt, the president did have a phone conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There's also reporting indicating that the defense secretary was at Mar-a-Lago with the president as the airstrikes were being launched overnight East Coast time. We've also understand from a U.S. official that in addition to a classified briefing, which the Secretary of State Marco Rubio had with the so-called Gang of Eight, top political and intelligence leadership on Capitol Hill, that he did reach out to 7 of the 8 members of Congress overnight to inform them that the airstrike and the air war had begun, and that he was able to speak to 7 of these 8 members of Congress. We don't know which was the person that Rubio was not able to speak with. We also understand that once the air campaign was underway, that the Pentagon did contact the leadership of both the Senate and the House Armed Services Committees to inform them of this action. But this is not the kind of notification that would satisfy the 1973 War Powers Resolution. Numerous congressional Democrats are saying that Congress needs to reconvene immediately in order to vote on whether to retroactively approve the Trump administration's decision to launch this war against Iran.
Okay, thanks so much, Ros Jordan, for us there in Washington, D.C. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the attack on Iran followed negotiations that were, quote, fruitless. He echoed Donald Trump's call for Iranians to take their fate into their own hands.
In recent months, the tyrants in Iran have been plotting to rebuild their nuclear and missile capabilities and to bury them underground, where we won't be able to strike them. If we don't stop them now, they will become invulnerable. To that end, their representatives in negotiations are trying to buy time, attempting to buy time in fruitless and deceitful negotiations with our American friends. Whoever lays down their weapon, including among the regime forces, will ensure their safety and secure their future. The Iranian people in all their diversity, Persians, Kurds, Azeris, and all other citizens of this wonderful nation, this is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your destiny into your own hands. Destiny into your own hands.
The Israeli military says it has preemptively imposed restrictions on people moving in and around the West Bank to counter potential terror threats. Noor O'Day is joining us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Noor, we heard a little bit from Netanyahu there, basically framing this along the same lines as Donald Trump as a war for the people of Iran. How is that message going to land coming from Israel, though?
Well, this is Netanyahu's line, Tom, and it has been his narrative for decades, preaching a need for overthrowing the government in Tehran for at least the past 20 or more years, saying to Donald Trump that negotiations with Tehran was pointless, that they would only be deception, and really rallying the Israeli public over this point of consensus. Israeli Jewish society is very polarized, but on Iran there seems to be almost a consensus, at least a politically correct one, where nobody would question the choice of attacking Iran, of preempting the Iranian regime from having more military capability. The doctrine in Israel of needing to be the hegemon in the region is one that does not have any pushback in Israeli politics or society. And that's why, even though the Israeli public has been prepared for a war that will exact a price, it's not clear what that price will be yet, but it will disrupt their lives. A state of emergency is in place in Israel. There are no public functions. There is no school. People have to stay next to the shelter or inside of one, and that's how they spent all of today. And yet there is support among Israelis for this, because they believe this is the only way for Israel to stay on top of it, on top of the region, that is, and to continue pushing back at its perceived enemies.
Okay, thanks so much for the moment, Noor. Well, Iran's foreign minister has been speaking to US media. Abbas Araghchi has acknowledged that Iran may have lost a few commanders, but that it wasn't, quote, such a big problem. He also said that Iran was open to dialogue.
If Americans want to talk to us, they know how they can contact me. We are certainly interested for de-escalation. This is not our war. This is an imposed war against us. This is a war of choice by the United States, and they have to pay for that.
Araghchi also stressed that Iran would not give up its right to enrich uranium.
We agreed to do enrichment only based on our needs, the needs of Iranian people. I can tell you one of our needs. It is your Tehran research reactor. This is a small reactor, by the way, built by Americans before the revolution. And this reactor produces radioisotopes, medicines needed for nearly 2 million Iranians. So how we can give it up, how we can just stop this reactor? So we would continue our program based on our own needs.
Okay, we're going to go back to Mohammed Val, who is in Tehran for us. And we heard from both Netanyahu and Donald Trump trying to frame this as a war for the people of Iran. How have the people of Iran responded to that message?
What we have seen so far is a demonstration that took place at the Palestine Square here in Tehran earlier this afternoon. We can't estimate the numbers, but it is probably more than 1,000 people gathered there. That's in a condition, a very specific condition, when people are fearing, more strikes and unable to go out of their homes, and when there are instructions that people shouldn't go to places where they can have some risk there. So we have seen that gathering of people there at the Palestine Square today, demonstrating against these strikes. That's the only sign now of reaction by people collectively. We have seen also a small demonstration in the streets here tonight in the same direction, people shouting against these strikes and condemning the Americans. The Americans are betting, and the Israelis as well, are betting on a kind of chaos that can happen, and that chaos can be seized by people who are opposed to this regime, because we have seen lots of demonstrations over the last few weeks and months against lack of freedoms and all kinds of complaints by those people against the regime. And the Americans and the Israelis think that just by conducting these very powerful strikes and probably killing some of the top leaders, that there is enough popular force and popular anger against the regime that people will go to the streets and take matters into their own hands. We have heard President Trump say that, but there are no signs so far of any of that thing happening in the country. Instead, the government is issuing statements, demands, and alerts, asking people to report about any suspicious activities in the streets, asking people to keep an eye on those types of activities, so that nothing of the sort that the Americans and the Israelis are planning can happen.
Okay, thanks, Mo. We're going to go to Rosalind Jordan once again, who is in Washington, D.C. And as we have been talking about, that this wasn't approved by Congress, many saying that Trump's attack on Iran doesn't have any mandate or legal basis to it. How big a problem is that actually going to be for President Trump, though?
Well, a slim majority, but nonetheless, a majority of Americans in a recent poll indicated they were not interested in a war in Iran. This is something on which Donald Trump ran when he ran for re-election in 2024, that he wanted to end wars. He was not interested in launching new wars, and he certainly did not want to see the U.S. military entrenched in another conflict in the Middle East. Now we have the second strike on Iran in about 8 months, and this this time you have 2 aircraft carriers and some, tens of thousands of U.S. troops in the greater Middle East who are poised to carry out this air war for some indeterminate amount of time. This is also a matter where it's pretty much falling along party lines in Congress. Democrats, almost to a person, are opposed to this military action. Republicans, with the exception of one who has been very critical of the Trump administration, applaud the decision to start launching airstrikes on Iranian targets overnight. Now, Congress is out for the weekend. The Senate is supposed to come back into session this coming Monday afternoon. The House of Representatives is not due back until Tuesday. But there are many Democrats in both the House and the Senate saying that people need to come back to Capitol Hill immediately in order to vote on a war powers resolution, whether to approve or to condemn the Trump administration's decision to go to war against Iraq. Because the Republicans hold a slim majority, it is unlikely that Democrats would be able to get a move of condemnation forcing the Trump administration to dial back. But they're saying that this debate needs to be held publicly because it has not, in their view, been held publicly up until now. There simply has been this drumbeat to war in the Democrats' view, although the Republicans are arguing that this is an action that is long overdue, decades long overdue in their view.
OK, thank you so much, Rosalind Jordan, for us there in Oman. OK, we've got many guests joining us now to help us dissect all of this. Abdullah Babood is a chair of the State of Qatar for Islamic Area Studies at Waseda University in Japan. He joins us from Muscat. Shrita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Here with me in the studio is Paul Musgrave. He's Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. And Mohammed Al-Masri is a Professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Thank you all very much for joining us. If I could begin with you, Abdullah, because obviously Oman played a significant role in trying to negotiate some sort of deal in the last few days. That obviously didn't happen. Can you just give us an idea of the feeling there among Omani leadership to what we've seen over the last 10 hours?
Well, I believe that Oman has been always trying to ensure that any conflict in the region is solved through dialogue and through negotiations. And particularly when it comes to the United States and Iran, but also other conflicts in the region. I think Oman has expended a lot of efforts in this matter. It's not just this particular negotiations, but if you look at last year also, before the 12 days war in June, then Oman had been trying to resolve this conflict. And as you know, if you go back even with the nuclear deal, Oman has always been active in this regard. So I believe, the amount of efforts that they have put and also the amount of enthusiastically, supporting a peaceful resolution of this conflict is going to, what is happening now is going to actually make the Omanis feel a bit disappointed, at least to say that. I think they will be dismayed with what has happened. The fact that the foreign minister of Oman, Said Badr, was on US TV last night saying that that Iran had almost agreed to everything that is possible that they wanted vis-a-vis, of course, the reduction of the uranium and the enrichment, and also willing to negotiate its regional policies and also its missile technology, etc. So Iran was actually accepting almost all the terms and wanted to have them agree through a negotiated settlement. And then, to be surprised like this with a war that is not expected, I think the Omanis will be, I believe they will be very upset and very dismayed. But I think they have no option but to continue the dialogue and to ensure that this comes to a peaceful resolution.
Yeah, Oman obviously not the only ones in the region to be dismayed at what has happened. Trita, if I can come to you next, what, if anything, changed, do you think, in the last 24 hours or so that made military action in the eyes of Donald Trump inevitable? What was the tipping point, despite all this anger that he must have known was coming from those in the Gulf region?
I think, unfortunately, Trump had already accepted the Israeli narrative and the Israeli red lines. The narrative that says that Iran is very weak and has no choice but to capitulate, and the red lines that are designed to be rejected by the Iranians. And as a result, once again, Trump allowed himself to be trapped by the Israelis into a situation in which war was the most likely outcome. He still could have pulled out. He could have celebrated the fact that the deal that Omani foreign minister in detail laid out on CBS News last night was far stronger than what the Obama administration had achieved with zero enrichment en masse, but also in de facto zero enrichment, at least for the next 3 to 4 years. And taken that as a huge victory and said that this was achieved because of his military threats, etc. But he nevertheless chose to go down the path because what he's looking for was humiliation. He was looking for capitulation rather than a deal.
Mohammed, do you subscribe to that view, that he was looking for annihilation, basically?
Yeah, and I think, and I said this in an earlier interview as well, I think this was basically pre-planned. I thought Marwan Bashara said it best a couple of hours ago. He said that the problem was that there was a breakthrough. And as soon as there was a breakthrough, the United States and Israel, I think, decided that this was, this was the time. But I think they've long wanted to attack. I think that the negotiations were just kind of a smokescreen. And so, yeah, this was a premeditated. This was a premeditated attack. And I think it's worth underscoring that this is an Israeli war. I thought the Omani statement from earlier today by the foreign minister was interesting. He said, this is not America's war. And what he meant, I think, is that this is Israel's war. And so we have another instance of the America First president, Donald Trump, doing things that are actually serving the Israeli agenda, not the American agenda. And let's watch and see what the fallout is on the American right wing. You already have people condemning this. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene taking to X a couple of hours ago and condemning not only this attack, but specifically the attack on the school that killed dozens of little Iranian girls. And then you have people on the right wing also retweeting or reposting Charlie Kirk from just 6 or 7 months ago, saying that a regime change operation in Iran would be insane. So let's watch and see what the fallout is on the American right.
Yeah, I see you nodding along there. Obviously, that is something that Donald Trump is going to have to take into account. How do you think we haven't heard from him since it's turned daytime there in the US. What do you expect from him in the coming hours, and how is he going to try and sell this to his base effectively?
Well, predicting what Donald Trump is going to do, fool's bet, not going to do it, because as we've seen over the past week, he can say one thing and then reverse course the next day. What I do think is that President Trump is going to have a real problem with his base, because he did campaign explicitly on going through with no new wars. And here we are in the war that American restrainers, that people on the right, that ordinary Americans who don't care about foreign policy have tried to avoid, which is not just a war in the Middle East, but a war with the most powerful of America's adversaries in the Middle East, and doing so with tactics that seem remarkably ill-matched to the goal that President Trump laid out, that goal of putative regime change or an option for regime change. I do think that the Americans may be more interested in negotiations than some of our guests have said. They have certainly said that they'd like to consider off-ramps or continuing dialogue. Certainly, I know they'll be lobbied for that on the Hill, by the base, and of course by regional governments who don't want to see any more of these explosions overhead that we've all been living with. But on the other hand, the Trump administration has laid out from the commencement of these discussions goals that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for any Iranian government to agree to, goals that touch on the very heart of sovereignty. And if you can't agree to something, you can't negotiate over it. And that's going to leave everybody in a really tough situation, even if sincerely, who knows if they do, they want that off-ramp.
Yeah, it makes